Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff! And finally, their goal! My word, what a rocket!
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli. It's the Match Day Preview. Forge FC coming off a monumental victory, and it's not hyperbole. It was monumental for so many reasons, and I'm going to tell you why in a sec. 3-2 win over Atletico Ottawa. Forge now with their sights set on Halifax. On the road, another big one Friday. Forge will be tested. Halifax in good form, playing at home, which is a very difficult stadium to play in at Wanderers grounds. I like the time, by the way, 6 o'clock Eastern time, with the match being played out in the Maritimes. I love the 6 o'clock starts. So good. It's a weekend, you kind of have the night ahead of you. And by the way, as always, don't ever forget, we go live after every single match. You hear the final whistle, and you will need to go onto YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And you get a live, instant match in review in the truest sense, because we are live, and it's right after the final whistle. Let's talk about Halifax, because Halifax is an interesting club. And they always have been. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you watch a game in Halifax, so just on television, even, and you get there's something there. Sometimes it's hard to describe, but it feels like you're watching a club in Halifax, and just with the stadium, you kind of have, there's a grittiness, there's heart to the stadium. Just it's a smaller stadium, but it's always packed, and the fans are so close to the field, and there's just something about it. You kind of get, it feels like an old, English club that's been around for 100 years. There's kind of this feeling about them. And I love watching matches in Halifax. I mean, on television. I don't, I'm not going to travel. I don't leave Hamilton. But if I did, to watch another CPL match, it would probably be in Halifax, because it's a great product. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that is a very, very passionate fan base, which is saying a lot, because the Wanderers, they've had up and down seasons. They don't have any championships, not a ton of success, outside of one finals appearance. And yet the fan base is growing regardless. And that says something. So great things happening in Halifax. And now they get a front row seat to Forge FC coming off a gigantic victory. And I can't understate it. I can't overstate it enough. If you haven't listened to the match in review, I suggest you do so, because there was just so much going on last game. You had the bizarre start with, Ottawa scoring 22 seconds in, Forge responding twice after miscues from Ottawa and mistakes. And then, Forge goes up 3-1. Ottawa comes back in the second half, and you think Forge is deflated. They're, tempers are kind of flaring. Forge looks kind of unhinged, and you're going, oh no, and then all of a sudden it just, Kadeem Kane, who had a tough moment in the previous match against Vancouver, gets the vote of confidence from his coaching staff. He gets another start. He starts the build where he goes to Kyle Becker, who is just, a maestro. In fact, I don't know if I've told you, I'm lobbying. I'm trying to convince Kyle to get his name officially changed to just the Maestro. The first name, the last name, Maestro, because he has been the architect of so many brilliant plays that just have not resulted in goals, because Forge has just been fighting it a bit lately. They had gone a few matches without scoring, and then they explode for, I think I said earlier that Forge won 3-2 against, it was 4-3, which, yeah, there's a big difference, because Becker, as I said, the maestro of that winning goal, where he's he's kind of, he's running around, not running around, but he's trying to find space. He's trying to find a soft spot in the midfield, and he's kind of juking and peeling off players. And the perfect timing, he gets open. Kane finds him, no look flip back. The ball ends up going to Kwesi Poku, who just perfect delivery into the box. And then you have Taron Campbell and Woobens Pacius waiting for it. Taron Campbell, who was one goal away from a hat trick, selflessly knows Pacius is behind him, acts as a decoy, takes a defender with him, doesn't even make an attempt on the ball. Pacius waiting for it, goes up in the air. It was just the whole build, the play, the guys involved. It was a thing of beauty. Tristan Borges getting on the board, getting an assist in that match, as beautiful an assist as you'll see. Just so many good things. And I do read, the comments from fans, and some fans upset that Forge blew the league. I saw one comment that they said that it felt like a loss. And I go, really? It felt like a loss? Okay. I mean, that I don't understand. Not only did they get the win, so it's literally not a loss, they won a difficult match to win when they faced so much adversity in this one. Getting scored on first, blowing a lead, clutch in all the players that you wanted to get going and to find themselves on the score sheet did it. It was just, I thought it was a thing of beauty. I thought it was the perfect way to win a match based on the circumstances and coming off a very disappointing loss to Vancouver. But anyways, I digress quite a bit, as I normally do. But let's get focused again here, because Halifax is next up. And all the doom and gloom, all the sky is falling stuff, but Forge FC, and I get it, it's fair, because we're used to a certain level of excellence with Forge as the most dominant team, hands down, not even close, not even up for debate, this league has ever seen. 3 titles in 4 seasons, 4 consecutive title appearances. We're used to just brilliance, and we weren't getting it. So you get a little antsy. That's fair, right? The expectations are everything. Despite all the sky is falling stuff, Forge FC is in second place right now. I mean, let's put this in perspective here. Second place, after 13 matches, they have 19 points. Halifax in 6th, but do not let their placing fool you, because they have 13 points and 2 matches in hand on Forge. So in a perfect world, if you're Halifax, winning those 2 matches in hand would put you in a tie for second place. So that tells you how well Halifax has been playing, because they had a really bad start and they have turned it on as of late. So this is going to be an interesting one on Friday in Halifax. Head to head, these 2 clubs, it was pretty even for a few years. Last year, though, Forge really pulled ahead. All time, Forge 8 wins, 7 draws, 2 losses against Halifax, but Forge have not lost to Halifax in their last 8 matches. 6 wins, 2 draws, and some huge wins at Wanderers ground, which you don't often see Halifax pull those kind of performances together. But Forge was able to dominate in those matches last year at Halifax. Home and away records, Forge, really good away this year. 6 games, 10 points. They have the 3rd best road record. They have 3 wins in that span. Halifax at home, this is where things are kind of shocking. In 4 matches, they only have 2 wins. Not terrible, but the 5th best home record in the CPL right now for Halifax. So you expect more from them. Halifax is driven by 2 guys that Forge is going to want to mark tightly. Their forward, Aiden Daniels. I don't know how much you buy into player ratings. And plus, depending where you're getting the ratings from, the formulas are different. But Aiden Daniels, far and away the best rating right now for Halifax. He's their forward. And then midfielder, who's, he is the Kyle Becker of Halifax. Lorenzo Caligari, midfielder, is those 2 guys are driving the bus. And Forge is going to have to be aware of those 2 guys. We are talking superstar level play this season. Daniels coming on this year after maybe disappointing debut with Halifax. Caligari, though, he's bringing it. And some people will tell you he is the best midfielder in the league. A bunch of Forge players and fans and coaches might say different, but regardless, the fact that it's up for debate says a lot. Big chances this season, right? This is a stat I like tracking because possession is one thing. We know Forge likes to dominate possession, but if you're possessing the ball and not getting big chances, who cares? But Forge is getting big chances, and they have all year. They are second in the league this season in big chances with 24. Halifax is fifth in the league with 18. Again, though, they've played 2 less matches. We are going to be joined very shortly, in fact, moments, by Gary Griffiths. He was on the program last season. I got to tell you, and I'll talk to him about this. Maybe I should apologize. I don't know why he hasn't been on the program since. He was fantastic last year. We need more of the Gary Griffiths of the world. Here's a guy who's a big soccer fan. All of a sudden, this new Canadian league starts up, the Canadian Premier League. Halifax has a team, and he just leans into it. I mean, he podcasts, blogs. He's just a fan covering this team so well, and he's so passionate. And it is the fan-driven content is what is going to help this league. And so guys like Gary Griffiths need to be cherished. And it's tough sometimes with fan-created stuff because, they're untethered, right? They're not obligated to toe a line. They can be controversial sometimes, but they drive engagement more than anybody else, and they drive interest in this league. So I'm grateful for guys like Gary, and he's covered Halifax via blogs, podcasts. He has a beat on this Wanderers club more than anybody, really. And his Twitter handle is @FromAways HFX. And you can follow him on Twitter and get all of his good stuff. And he joins the program now. All right, Gary. So first time talking this season. We chatted last year, and it was a great chat. I'm not sure why it's taken so long for the next one, to be honest with you. But glad you're back. So thanks for coming back. Obviously, it wasn't too awful.
No, thank you for having me back again. I was concerned after the last one. I thought, was there something I said? Did my jokes not quite land? But when your name dropped into my inbox the other day, it was a relief, I must admit.
Yes, I don't actually have an explanation. I'm not sure what happened, but glad to have you back. And I have to ask you though. You're the guy. Even though you don't have an official capacity with the club, I kind of see you as the Halifax Wanderers authority, and that's just me speaking. You haven't said it. That's just kind of the way I kind of see things. I love following you on Twitter. Twitter handle, by the way, @FromAways HFX. And the last Halifax match and Halifax's form recently, anyway, it was a comeback victory against York, who's been really good lately at home. Halifax, I guess they came back from 2 deficits and earned themselves a draw. In the thick of a playoff race like the Wanderers are, how big was that performance on the road in getting that point?
I think it's big from a points perspective because the league is so tight at the moment that marginal gains are everything. So it is big from a points perspective, but I consider more than that of how big it is from a psychological perspective. Because when you had the start to the season that we had, where the performances were quite good, but the results weren't really there, the second you start to build some momentum, which we had started to do after beating Cavalry and Valor in succession, once you start to build that momentum, you don't want it to go anywhere. You want it to continue snowballing. So when we got to York away, you're thinking, okay, we've got a bit of momentum, but those were both home wins. Now we're going to a team in York who they had lost one recently, but they had really been in quite good form for quite a while. Like, you don't want to lose. You definitely don't want to lose. And to show the mentality to come back from being behind twice as well, that was the most pleasing thing for me, because as much as the points are important, there's not such a deficit at the moment that you can't come back from. But psychologically, the blow that might have landed would have been pretty big. And progress isn't linear. It is 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of the time. But we're in a nice spot at the moment. I think the feeling's good around the club. The culture feels really good. So you just want to you want to kind of follow that for as long as you can.
And goals were hard to come by early in the season, but for Halifax, I mean, they've found their offense since. What's been the difference?
I think we were always underperforming our XG, and I know XG is a metric that a lot of people don't really buy into. I don't put everything in it. I don't put a huge amount of stock in it, but I do think it's valuable as a tool. So we were always underperforming the XG, but I think the difference is like with the coach we've got now in Patrice, and he's introduced quite a complex system, and complex systems like that don't just start working after 4 weeks or 6 weeks. They take time, and the patterns were always there, but we were kind of a very good team in the middle third of the pitch, but we were kind of lacking a bit in the first third and the final third. But now you can kind of see the precision and the pace of the final pass, players knowing when to collapse into the box, players knowing when to make a second or third man run instead of just trying to get there quickly. This is all coming, and you can see what's happening on the training ground, and you can see it actually developing and appearing on the weekend now as well, which is really pleasing.
So, as much as the club's recent success, has resulted from stellar team play, am I correct in saying that Aidan Daniels and Lorenzo Caligari appear to be the kind of machines, the key cogs in that machine right now?
Yeah, mate, definitely. I mean, Lorenzo Caligari, I have no idea why he's in this league. Honestly,
Yeah.
He's just... You watch him, like even just watching him warm up at the Wanderers grounds, just like watching him in the little rondos and watching him spray passes about. Like one day I want someone to explain to me how that's happened. And realistically, he probably won't be in the league very long, because like he's demonstrably playing in a league that's slightly below his level, in my opinion. So I think he's probably being watched right now, but let's enjoy him while you can. Brilliant little player. And Aidan Daniels, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I think he's made the team of the week 3 times in a row now. Probably going to win player of the month. 3 goals, 3 assists. Like, has already gone beyond his output from last season. And he's a player. When we signed him, I was so excited about him. Like, I think I've been covering the club for the league, not for the league. So I've been covering the club since it started, since day one. And there's only 2 players I've ever gone really, really big on when we've signed them. And the first one was Joao Morelli, which I think was luckily came out okay. And the other one's Lorenzo. The other one was Aidan Daniels when we signed him, because you watch his full matches in USL and he's got so much to offer. And then he arrived, and in his first season, it just didn't quite happen for him for a number of reasons, which we don't have time to get into. But now you see he's a player who's got a lot of confidence now. I think he's been given freedom, but structured freedom. Like, he's not just going anywhere. He's playing in pockets, and he's playing in areas he likes to play in. And yeah, he's been in such a good run of form lately that and I think there's another level he can get to as well, which is the most exciting thing.
And with Lorenzo, this is also probably, just from a Halifax perspective, one of those games that you kind of circle with. You look at Forge's midfield, which has always been deep. Whether it's Becker or Sissoko or Hojai Rapport when he's healthy, Noah Jensen, whoever it is in that midfield for Forge, Lorenzo's going to be getting a lot of attention. So do you look at matches like this as kind of the where you kind of start kind of the measuring stick, let's call it the measuring stick type match for a player like Lorenzo, who has made a name for himself, but is trying to make an even bigger name for himself?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first barometer for him was we played Ottawa in the first game, and you think probably the best midfielder in the league is Ollie Bassett, and seeing Lorenzo, in my opinion, playing him off the park is probably overstating it a little bit, but I thought he did a number on him in the first game. And then you move to Forge in the second game, and Forge have, I think, by some distance, got the best midfield in the league in terms of depth, in terms of individual quality. So to see him, I wouldn't say he bossed the game against Forge, but to see him still do Lorenzo-y things, still sit in the pocket like deep line quarterback sort of role, spraying it about. He can play diagonals, he can punch it in short. Like, he could still do that against the best midfield in the league. And you kind of watch that and go, right, yeah, no, he's the real deal.
Yeah, and I do want to, by the way, I left his name out because the lines are still kind of blurred on whether he's a center back or a midfielder, but Ashton Yodi Johnson, of course, part of that group as well. Yeah, it should be interesting to watch and a lot of fun. Even just kind of watching the game within the game, the runs off the ball, and when you play that position, it is more than just what shows up on the stat sheet, and sometimes you do have to watch a player closely to see what the coaches are actually seeing. And when I think of Halifax, I think of hostile grounds for the visiting team. Has Wanderers grounds maintained that reputation this season?
It's coming back. It's definitely coming back. I feel like, and I hold Forge accountable for this actually, because Forge twice last season really slapped us about, like 2 absolute batterings, and you felt something break on those days. I think you kind of looked around the stands, and where I sit in the stadium, I sit in more of the relaxed sort of area. I sit like dead centre back row, so it's a brilliant view, but it's not quite where the noise is happening in the kitchen. But I remember looking around me that day, and I was probably projecting a bit because it's how I was feeling, but it was like something's broken, something's not right. And I think that carried through into the start of the season a little bit, because although we did have all these new players and this new coaching staff, I think the nature of this league is that a large proportion of fans don't follow it week in, week out. They don't follow every transfer, every coaching change. So they're kind of judging it by the same standards as previous seasons. It's just what happens. And I think there was some scars were carried over into the new season, and it wasn't until we beat Valor a couple of weeks ago that you really felt that that pressure ease a little bit. And I think the players were feeding off that sort of anxiety in the stands a little bit as well. And as soon as we got that first win, like honestly, I think the game against Cavalry, the last home game, that's as good as it's been at the grounds, I think, in terms of atmosphere and energy, connection between players and fans. How something I said to one of my mates who I sit with was like, fans are now really reacting to what's going on the pitch rather than just kind of like more choreographed chanting and stuff like that. People are actually getting angry if a foul goes in on their player, or if someone misplaces a pass from the other team, we're giving it the big un to them and stuff. So It's nice to see that sort of thing develop now.
Does Forge bring a little, I in terms of, obviously the only times I've really watched Halifax, to be frank, is when they've played Forge. Does Forge bring out a little extra hostility among the Halifax supporters just because of, I guess, kind of the resume they bring with them?
They bring out an extra bit of fear in this supporter, to be honest. Like I dread this home game because other than beating you in the first ever home game, and I think we beat you a couple of years ago as well, other than that, you seem to absolutely batter us, quite frankly, whenever you come to Wanderers grounds. So it's one of those fixtures where I go into it with a little bit of fear. Again, I don't know if I speak for other supporters. I probably don't. I feel like I'm more of an anxious supporter because I'm like always fearing the worst. But for me personally, yeah, there's a bit of intimidation there, I must admit. But I'm hoping this year, new players, new coaching staff, that it's not the same as before.
The teams they've played to a lot of draws over the years. I mean, recently Forge has had the edge, but I think Forge's all-time record is like 8-7-2 against Halifax. So a lot of tight matches up until last season anyway. But when you look around the league, I would say most teams look at the Wanderers, just the way they've cultivated that, just the fan support. I mean, there has to be some jealousy there in just how things have, because the reality is, Halifax, they've had some up and down years, but the fan support doesn't seem to be waning. In fact, it might even be getting stronger. What is it? What's working so well in Halifax and for this league and for this club?
I think, for starters, the team at the club have done a tremendous job since day one of building a culture and an environment around the club, which makes people want to go in spite of the results. I don't know if you've ever been to the grounds, but the fact that it is right downtown in Halifax. There's pubs everywhere. You're next to the public gardens. Everything's in walking distance. That certainly helps because you can plan a whole day out around it. So just anecdotally, I know people in the city who don't follow the sport or the club, but if they know a home game's on, they'll get tickets because it's walking distance and they can go for a drink or a meal beforehand, and it's all part of the day. So that really, really helps. And I think as well, and I can only kind of speak to this through having friends here, but I feel like a lot of people from the East Coast have got kind of, it's often historically at least felt like a bit of a forgotten part of the country. So people really get behind there's a lot of civic pride in Halifax. So people really get behind any sort of sports team or event that comes here because historically maybe stuff hasn't come here as much as it probably should have done. And they like things that show the city in a favourable light. And when you've got the One Soccer cameras here showing a full house on a sunny day, it makes the city look good. So yeah, everyone's happy with that.
Yeah, it makes for great TV watching. It has one of those kind of there's, I don't know, maybe heart. There's just something, there's some heart there. Like it's not just it doesn't feel like a club that's only been around for a few years. It feels like, it looks like a club that has been around for as long as some of the Premier League clubs have been, just kind of the atmosphere. And it's great to watch. And by the way, you're a humble guy, so I'm cover your ears, but Gary Griffiths, guys like you are what this league needs, because the way you've covered the club via, blogs, podcasts, and you're really just doing it out of love for the sport and love for the club. And it's people like you that are going to help grow the game. And I'm sure that wasn't your intent. But listen, you're doing a great job.
Back at you, mate. Back at you. You're covering Forge in the same way and bringing all them eyeballs to Forge as well. So I think a healthy league has a culture of fan-supported content as well, rather than just league-produced content. And it's really, really important. I like, the reason I started it in the first place was because, in the English Premier League, I'm an Arsenal fan, and like, I obsessively kind of digest as much content. I listen to all the podcasts, I read all the blogs, because I just love reading about it. So
right.
I recognized there was a bit of a hole for that with the league.
Yeah.
And now there's so much wondrous stuff out there. Like, it's not just me, there's podcasts, there's other bloggers. So people are writing and recording really good stuff. So I hope every club in the league eventually has just as much coverage from supporters.
Absolutely. All right. Gary Griffiths, thanks so much. Follow Gary on Twitter. He's easily one of the more entertaining voices around the league, at From Away's HFX. All right, let's move on to the 3 keys to the match for Forge FC, looking to build off that huge home win against Atletico Ottawa, now with their sights set on Halifax. Key number 1 for Forge FC: lead by example. Let's go back to the last match. Taron Campbell, the all-time leading goal scorer in this league, 2 goals. Woobens Pasillas, big year last year, fighting it a bit this season, finished his last match with a goal and an assist. Borges had a beautiful assist. Becker, like I mentioned, the maestro, the architect of a lot of these builds and a lot of these big chances. He was incredible in the last match. If you are going to build off of that, let's face it, like any team in any league, in any sport, you want to lean on your leaders. And for Forge, that performance has, from Forge's big guys, they got to be feeling good going into this one. And it is a beautiful thing. The exact guys you want to get going are now going, and you're going to want to lean on them. These are your guys. They're going to lead by example. And if you're going to continue this run, if you're going to pick up points, these are the guys you need. Lean into your leaders who will lead by example. Key number 2 for Forge FC. First out the gates. Listen, you're not doing yourself any favors when you concede the first goal in 6 consecutive matches. That's been the case for Forge FC. Some good news. Halifax, despite their success, they've been the first to concede in their matches 5 out of the last 7 times they've hit the field. So there's some susceptibility there. Something has to give. One of these 2 teams have to give up the first goal you would expect. And it is going to be big, paramount. Forge cannot get behind the 8 ball again. It just plays. It's a blow mentally. It kind of takes you out of your game plan. All of a sudden, you're kind of just throwing out the game plan, and you get anxious and you start forcing things. And do not give up the first goal again. First out the gate, Forge, they lead the league in shots. Second most shots on target per match this season. And Halifax, by the way, they only have 2 clean sheets this year. That is second worst in the league. There is an opportunity here for Forge to come out the gate and score first. And that has to be a big part of the game plan going into this match. Key number 3 for Forge FC. I've talked about Halifax, that stadium, that crowd. They lead the league in attendance. It is a hot crowd. And Halifax, if you're Forge, take those fans right out of the game. How do you do that? Well, you start with that second key, first out the gate. The third key, not only do you need to score first, you want to play that Forge brand of soccer, that possession, that methodically breaking down your opponent. You're hanging onto the ball. You're not giving away any freebies. You're playing forward, right? You're not going backwards. 56.8% is what Forge averages this season in terms of possession per match. And that has to be the game plan here. Hang on to the ball. Do not let those Halifax fans get their team going. Keep them quiet. Keep them hushed. Halifax, by the way, no slouch in terms of possession at 52.1%. They're on 4th in the league, so middle of the pack, but over 50%. The longer you have it, it's very simple. The longer Halifax does not. Get those fans frustrated. You take a lead, then you hang on to the ball, and all of a sudden, all of those things that make Halifax what they are at home is completely wiped out, and you are playing on the front foot, and all of a sudden Halifax is at a big disadvantage. Those are your 3 keys. Right after the match, head over to YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, any of those 3, maybe all 3 at the same time, whatever you want to do, and catch the match in review, which goes live right at that final whistle. And hopefully we are again talking about another 3 points for Forge FC. Okay, we'll talk to you then.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.